almost to Valentine's Day, and I made quite a few crafts in January for Valentine's Day, but if you're like me, you probably have a lot of leftover hearts that you don't know what to do with. So today I'm going to show you how you can take these leftover hearts and turn them into decorations for spring. I picked up these 2 yard stakes from the Dollar Tree, not because I wanted to put them in my yard, but because I really liked how thick the wooden heart was that was on the stick. I want to turn these into a planter for my front door, so I'm going to use 2 of those and a pack of these super jumbo wooden craft sticks that I get from Walmart. The sticks were pretty easy to pop off the back of these wooden hearts. The first one broke as I popped it off. The second one came off in one piece, but I was able to use a staple remover to remove the piece that had broken off. I also had to remove the stickers, and I'm not sure why there was a hole at the top with a ribbon in it. I don't know why you would want to hang a yard stake in your house, but that was okay. I took that off too. Then I got to work cutting down my jumbo craft sticks. I was able to get 2 pieces out of each craft stick. I cut them down to 3 1/4 inches. I did go through the pack a bit and make sure that I had the sticks that were the straightest and not warped, because it would make it easier to put this project together. And as always, I like to use my paper trimmer to cut my craft sticks because I think it gives me a more precise cut. Now, before I get started on painting everything, I want to glue everything together. So I'm taking those craft sticks that I had cut down, and I laid one of my wooden hearts down, and you can see I have the word love facing me. That's going to be on the inside of my hanging planter. And I'm just taking my craft sticks and I'm lining it up with the bottom edge of the side of the wooden heart, and I glued about 8 sticks on each side. So once I had the first set of sticks glued in place on the one side, then I was able to add the second heart by placing some hot glue along the edges of the sticks that I had lined up, and I just put the second wooden heart on that edge. Now, I did go through, and where I had hot glued those sticks to the edge of the heart, I went through and added some hot glue on the inside just to make it a little more secure and sturdy. After all my sticks were in place on one side of the heart, then I repeated that on the second side, just adding hot glue to each end of the sticks and attaching them to both hearts. I chose to paint my container white. I'm using some white chalk paint here, and because that red is so dark, I did have to give it 2 coats on the hearts. I made sure that I got the hearts and the sticks, and then I did paint some white paint down in the inside. I didn't bother getting the whole inside because I knew you wouldn't be able to see it. I just did the top 3 inches or so, just in case any of that peeked out from the inside. If you've been hanging out with me for a while, you know I love to distress and age things, so I'm using some of the mineral paint by Waverly and a big chippy brush, and I'm just distressing all of the edges of my container. Now, like I say in most of my videos, if you don't like that distressed look, whenever you're painting anything, you can change it up to fit your style. And another suggestion I have too, if you don't want to paint this container at all, you could use some of the peel and stick wallpaper that you can get at the Dollar Tree, and you could cover these hearts in the wallpaper. That was actually my initial idea for this container, was to use some of that wallpaper, but when I dug through my craft supplies, I couldn't find 2 pieces of the same paper. I had a bunch of different random patterns, but I knew I needed 2 because I was using 2 hearts. So that's just another idea for you if you don't really care for the distressed look. Now, you can decorate the front of your container however you'd like. I have some of these really pretty stencils from Essential Stencils. This video isn't sponsored and I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I do really like their stencils, so I'll leave a link in the description box for their website if you want to look through. I've always had really good luck with their rub-on transfers. They come off really easily. I just use a craft stick when I'm placing them on something. I cut apart one of the big flowers, and then there were some little bumblebees in this pack too, so I added a few of those to the front of my container. Now, the Dollar Tree does carry a pretty big selection of rub-on transfers, so you could always find something there, or this would be a great place to use some window clings that you might have. You could just Mod Podge those to the front of your container. I'm using some thinner jute rope to act as a hanger for my container. I get this from Amazon. It's a little bit thinner than the stuff you can get from the Dollar Tree. Anytime I'm cutting a length of rope that I'm going to glue to the inside of something that you're not actually going to see the ends for it, I like to take a piece of clear tape and wrap it around it and then cut through the center of the clear tape. That way it holds the ends together on the piece that I'm going to use, and it also keeps the ends together on the part of the roll that I'm not going to use. So then I just use some hot glue to attach the two ends to the inside of my container. Before hanging it on my front door, I added in a few bunches of some pretty spring flowers. At Hobby Lobby, I picked up one of their wooden pallet hearts, and I also grabbed a pack of their smaller wooden hearts. There's two different sizes in this pack, and for this project, I'm just going to use the smaller ones. I also used my Cricut to create a decal that says Hello Spring, but you could use scrapbook stickers or poster stickers instead. I liked the natural wood on the pallet heart, so I didn't want to cover that up with paint at all. But on these smaller wooden hearts, I wanted to add a pop of color, and I really like to use yellow for spring, so I'm using some yellow chalk paint, and I gave 5 of my smaller hearts a coat of that paint. After my paint was dry, I just applied one letter to each of the hearts to spell out the word hello. This is going to go on the second wood panel on that pallet heart, and then on the third wood panel I applied my decal that says spring so that the whole heart says Hello Spring. Now keep in mind, if you don't have one of these pallet hearts, you could also do this same thing on just one of the plain wooden hearts from the Dollar Tree, or you could even just use a wood round and spell out the same thing, and I think it would look just as cute. I actually don't have a Hobby Lobby in my town. The closest one to me is between 45 minutes and an hour away, so I don't get there too often. So when I do go, I tend to buy quite a few things because I don't know when I'll be back there again. So if you don't have a Hobby Lobby near you, you have other options by either using a plain wooden shape like a heart or a circle. Once I had all of my decals applied to my wood pieces, I started gluing down my little yellow hearts. I laid them out on the wood pallet heart first just so I had an idea of the spacing that I needed. You can see they fit pretty perfect across the front. There was a little overhang on each side, which I was fine with. I started with the middle letter, the L, and I glued that down first, and then I worked my way out to each side just in case I needed to adjust the spacing at all. There are a lot of different ways that you could decorate this heart. I wanted to add a bunch of greenery because to me spring means green. So I had 2 bundles that I had from the Dollar Tree. They were a little bit too long for the top of my heart, so I used some tape and I taped the bottoms of the stems all together before I cut the excess off. That way I didn't have to worry about trying to bundle them all up separately. Once I had my 2 bunches cut down to the size that I needed, I put the 2 stems together in the center, and then I used some jute cord. I hot glued it on, and then I started wrapping it so that you couldn't see the raw edges of the bottoms of those stems, and it covered up that tape also. Once I had the centers all covered with the jute cord, then I used that same cord and I took 3 lengths of it to tie just a simple shoestring bow to hot glue over the top of the cord. Now, if you wanted to, you could dig around in all of your ribbons that you have and make a nice big bow for the top of this. I wanted to keep my decorations a little more simple just because I was afraid if I made too big of a bow, it would cover up some of the word hello. But if you wanted to make a big bow, you could also place it down at the bottom underneath the word spring, and I think that would look pretty too. Now, this wood pallet heart does have a sawtooth hanger on the back of it, which was perfect for where I wanted to hang it. But if that's not going to work for you, just use some kind of rope and attach a hanger to the back. I have this brand new pack of foam hearts from the Dollar Tree. There's 12 pieces in this pack and I haven't used any of them, so I want to use a few of these up to make a table mat. And if you're a paper crafter like me, you probably have some scrapbook paper on hand, and this will come in handy for this project. I'm using the Bloom collection by Maggie Holmes. I've always loved all of her collections, but the Bloom has been one of my favorites. And this is a good place to use some single-sided paper rather than using up some of your double-sided paper. If you don't have scrapbook paper, you could also use wrapping paper, you could use calendars, you could use gift bags, anything with a pretty print on it. Now I'm using a glue stick here. This is the Scotch brand. It's a nice big one, so it covers a lot of surface area and it dries fast and it has a great hold. I'm rubbing that all over one side of my foam heart and I'm just placing it on my sheet of paper. I did pick out 6 different patterns from this collection, and I love using a collection for something like this because I don't have to worry about matching up colors or prints. It's all made to coordinate together, so I just picked out 6 of the ones that I liked the best. Now for the papers that don't have a direction to them, I was able to just glue the heart right in the corner, but on some of the papers like this little bird paper, you can see that my birds are facing up, so I want to make sure that my heart is going in the correct direction on this paper. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just rubbing the glue stick all over one side of my foam heart, but when I place it on this paper, rather than putting it down in the corner, I'm facing it upright so that all of my little birdies will be going in the right direction. Another reason I like using the glue stick for this project is that you won't be able to see it through the paper and it doesn't warp the paper. This scrapbook paper is a little bit thicker than your standard copy paper, so if you were to use a wet glue like Mod Podge or Art Glitter Glue, I think it would be fine. It wouldn't warp at all. But some of the thinner papers like calendar pages and things like that, they tend to warp when a glue is a little too wet. So that's why I like to stick with a glue stick here. And if you use hot glue, there's a good chance that once the hot glue dries, you'll be able to see the lines from the hot glue through the paper. So that's why I recommend using a glue stick. Once I had all of my hearts glued onto my 6 pages, then I just took some scissors and cut around the edges. Now, because there were 12 hearts in this pack, you could actually make 2 different table mats and use up the whole pack, but I just made one for today. Another suggestion I have is if you like to sew and you have a sewing machine, rather than gluing the hearts the whole way down to the paper, you could just take them to your sewing machine and sew around the edges, and I think that would look really pretty. It would be a really nice detail to have that stitching along the outside. Up until recently, I actually didn't even own a sewing machine, but I got some Michael's gift cards for Christmas, so I decided to put those to good use and buy my first sewing machine. I grew up sewing because my mom loves to sew, but I just never owned my own sewing machine, so I'm really looking forward to using that in some future projects. I want to define the edges of my hearts a little bit more, so I'm using my Tim Holtz Distress inks in the color Black Soot, and I'm just using an ink blender to go along the outside edges of my hearts. Anytime I'm using different prints or different patterns stacked on top of each other, I like to do this around the edges because it helps differentiate between the 2 patterns and makes it look a little less busy. If you didn't have any ink pads or an ink blender, you could also do this with a little bit of paint. Just make sure you're dry brushing it, get all of the excess paint off before you start going around the edges of your papers. I needed a circle to hold everything together in the center of my mat, and I happen to have a 3-inch scallop circle punch in my stash, so that's what I used. But if you don't have something like that, just trace around a coffee mug or a bottle of paint, anything with a circle that's at least 3 inches. It could be 4 or 5 inches, whatever you have on hand will work fine. And then just to keep it cohesive, I ran around the edges again with that same ink. I added some more of that glue stick to the back side of my little circle, and then I took 3 of the hearts and I laid them out on my surface with all of the points facing towards the middle, and I used that scallop circle in the center to hold the 3 of them together. Then I flipped the whole thing over, and on the back side I added my next 3 hearts, and I made sure I staggered them in between the first 3 of the hearts, and then I just punched out another one of those circles and laid that on the back side to make sure that all 3 of those stuck together as well. Now, because these bottom 3 hearts aren't actually glued to the top 3 hearts, once I had them in place, then I went through with that glue stick and I would lift one side up and add a little bit of glue and put it back down just to make sure that everything was nice and connected. Now, obviously, since this is just paper, you want to make sure that wherever you're setting this, that it's not going to get wet or you don't place anything that's too hot on it. I do like that the foam is on the back side of this because it protects the surface that I'm putting on. It's nice and soft, so it won't cause any scratches. Thanks so much for coming to hang out and craft with me again today. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of my future videos. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.